Hello, Thrive Nation. I've got a very special human being, and I want him to introduce himself because he's gone from pain to purpose. He's got a very unique story. We're going to be unpacking some unique sort of areas of health. We haven't spoken about cancer, and this man is a high expert, advice, adversary to the Anti-Cancer Institute of America. And he's just a really special, unique human being because I've heard him speak on many podcasts. I heard him many, many years ago. And so I want him to introduce himself. We will put all his, certifications, who he is, the websites, the links, his podcast in the show notes. But who is Wade Lightheart?
I've been asking myself that question most of my life, and the answer keeps evolving. So
that's a good thing. That's a good thing, Wade.
We'll keep working on that. From a historical relative standpoint, I'm just a kid from, I always say, Tar Paper Shack, Canada. I grew up in a very rural, cold environment. Got involved in all the things, sports and things that kids are pre-internet. So I'm dating myself, and now I just hit 50 recently, but. When I was 15, I had a life-changing experience in that my parents moved from a small village to like a no village. It was 5 miles to my nearest neighbor up a dirt road.
Yeah.
Shortly after, my sister was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. And at the same time, she gave me a book on bodybuilding that had a picture of Mr. California, Troy Zucolato, two pretty girls in bikinis. He had all these muscles, and then I opened up the pages and they were talking about Venice Beach, California, and Gold's Gym, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the biggest movie star in the world. And as my sister's health, going through the medical model and treatment, eroded until her untimely death 4 years later at 22, she was 4 years my senior, I was busy building what I felt was health and vitality through weight training and lifting weights. I built a makeshift workout facility in my barn. I'd go out there, tractor tires and sawhorses and pulley systems and all these kind of things that Rocky movie or something, and began training. And with this dream that one day I was going to live in California and compete at the Mr. Universe and have a nutritional supplement company. And I used to, get on my soapbox every week when my parents would say, I'd come in because my hands would be, I'd tear the skin off my hands sometimes because it would freeze to the bar in the winter, it'd be like 30 below and stuff. And they're like, what are you doing this for? And I would tell them this grandiose vision of how I was going to do these things at one point in my life. And eventually it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out really well. But you were also a bodybuilding champion, and you've got a very specific dietary sort of philosophy. I love your uniqueness that I think Matt, your partner's got, I think he's more keto, and you've got other people that are paleo, and you're more on the sort of vegetarian vegan side for what I remember, but you make it very bespoke and unique with your supplements. So tell us a little bit about your unique sort of nutritional approach, because I think it's really something that's necessary, because there's a lot of diet wars out there, Wade, and I think they can be avoided if we can just stick to some principles.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, why would anybody engage in any dietary practice? Well, there's 3 specific reasons that we've identified. One for aesthetic purposes, one for performance-based purposes, and one for health purposes. And so the first thing that one has to identify is which one of those aspects are key at any point in time. Generally, most people get started for an aesthetics ideal. They want to lose weight. They want to look good for the girls or their guys or whatever. And as we're younger, we're more aesthetically driven because that determines, attractiveness and the idea of replication. You can get into all the biology about that. So there's an undercurrent drive there around that. And then as we tend to age, or we get into more specific sides, we're trying to eat a diet either consciously or unconsciously, which is performance-based. Now, I don't look at things as absolutes. I go, the truck driver who's feeling tired pulls into the truck shop, takes an energy drink or a coffee and a bar out of the place, is following what he feels is the best version of a performance-based diet. His blood sugar is low. He's getting drowsy. He pulls into the truck shop. He gets a shot of glucose. He gets some caffeine, pulls back out, goes the next 2 hours. He crashes, pulls in again, and does it. So he's adjusting his diet to a performance-based.
Yeah.
Same thing as a mother who's, taking, foods to make sure the blood sugar for their kids, they don't go all crazy on a long drive or something like that. So, and then the final piece, what happens is usually there's consequences to those aesthetic diets or performance-based diets. And there's some compromisation of one's health. And then usually people will adjust their diet based on either regaining their health or retaining their health. And that becomes more of a focus as people age. Now, ultimately, in an ultimately developed program, you would be able to account for all of those in the appropriate ratios relative to your age, relative to your goals and to your performance parameters. Now, there's another overarching piece that comes with this. And this is an area that Matt, my business partner, runs BiOptimizers, and we founded the company. We were both personal trainers, both had a background in exercise physiology, nutrition, kinesiology, these type of things. And he did very well on a ketogenic diet. And I did really well on a plant-based diet. Even though we grew up in the same part of the world, we grew up in similar environments. And we used to have these debates. Some would say arguments.
Some would say wars.
Some would say wars. And so there was this back and forth debate. And the point of the debates, once we got past just trying to hold an ego position, is like, well, how do we get to the truth? And when we experimented with each other's dietary strategies, we found strengths, but we also found weaknesses. So I did do better when I supplemented my diet with some high quality essential fatty acids. But if my my fats got too high, my body, I would just get the runs. I'd see fat in the stool. I didn't feel good. For Matt, he started incorporating more fibrous foods with his ketogenic diet, which was an improvement. But if he ate too much, he just didn't feel good. Or if he had too many carbohydrates, he would have issues. Now, years later, so we worked on this for decades and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, now you can, what took us 20 years to figure out, you can take a simple DNA test. And it turns out that a certain percentage of the population processes fats really well, and a certain percentage process carbohydrates really well. And that's going to be, you're going to lean more to a ketogenic or more to a plant-based diet. And then somewhere in between would be like a paleo. And so I see those as kind of like the three, horsemen or legs of a table. And then there's extremes on each one of those edges. Now, unfortunately, in an internet world, the extremes tends to push the messaging. And what happens is, if you go to a bell curve, and we're talking about this, we're releasing a book on this next year. We're publishing with a major publishing house to actually illustrate how do you figure this out for yourself. The challenge when you go online is you let's say you get exposed to the whatever diet, the ABC diet, let's call it whatever. And you read the testimonials, and if you look at a bell curve of distribution, there's going to be like 1.5% of the people on that bell curve that when they did this diet, it was the perfect diet for where they were in their life. They recovered from some health condition. Their blood sugar got better. Their cholesterol dropped. Their brain turned on. And those are all on the testimonial pages, and they're very convincing, and they got the video, and you got the advocate out there. And then on the other side of the equation, there's 1.5 people that are people who are refunding the product. They felt terrible, got sick. It was awful for them. But you don't hear about those. But those people will disgruntledly attack on social media that program. And they now become the advocates because they switch to another diet, and they now move to that 1.5%. And so now they become that which they were attacking in the other guys because they found what's right for them. And the problem is there's a need to bolster one's dietary practices in a social circle to get social acceptance of what you're doing, or to reinforce that which you don't understand. And that's my, literally 35 years in the dietary industry and seeing all the trends throughout that time and the recycled trends several times. I began to recognize there's benefits and liabilities to every diet. And there's diets built for different people at different times in their life. And the question is, how do you identify what's the major direction of your life? How do you stay flexible so that you can change as your body changes? And then how do you augment and optimize your diet based on your individual limitations and your predispositions for high performance? And if you can figure that out, you can live long, you can live strong, and you can have a diet that you can feel confident about, and you don't have to put anybody else's diet down.
So the summary there, which I think was really sort of unpacked, is that it's very bespoke. It's very unique. If anyone's listening now, there's not one specific diet for everyone. There's extremes on both sides. You got to know your body subjectively. Maybe you can give us some of the subjective signs if people can't do the DNA testing. Or I've been in functional medicine now for 15 years. We do a lot of testing. Sometimes the DNA testings, those epigenetic factors are not pushed when you change the diet, and people don't know. Is it body composition? Is it hsCRP? Is it inflammatory markers? You know, from a functional medicine point of view, some people can do the gambit of testing. They do stool testing, organic acid testing, and some people just can't afford it, or they don't have a health coach. So where do people sort of, you know, analyze and, as you said, get to know oneself and be able to adapt and evolve, you know, whether it's performance or age or things that change?
You know, when I started out, we had none of this stuff. It was a thing called this. It was called a journal. And when I was competing in my competitions, I had hired a coach. His name was Scott Abel. And I had also read about Frank Zane and some Vince Garanda, one of the precursors in the bodybuilding world, and all the greats in the industry kept a record of their training and their dietary practice. And one of the things that we would track was, how did I feel after a meal? How was my energy levels going into exercise? Was I tired? Did I sleep much? You know, was I fired up? And so from those just biofeedback markers, which have developed over millions of years of evolution, I was able to see and observe changes. I mean, I'll give you an example that people can relate to. It's kind of funny. How many people actually look at their crap when it goes in the toilet? Almost everybody. If you have a good one, you're kind of like, oh, you feel good. If something's off, there's an instant recognition that something's not quite right. So where did that come from? There is an understanding of that innate in their intelligence. Same thing as if I feel bloated after a meal. Did I puff up from something? You know, did I break out in hives? So there are extreme indications of dis-ease, or, you know, when your body's not processing something, but there's micro things that we don't think about. And unfortunately, when I was coaching people, and I coached over 20,000 people, I think it was, over a couple decades, the first thing I would do is I'd say, okay, I need you to write down what you eat, when you eat, and how you feel for the next week. Because I'd ask them, how was your diet? Oh, I eat pretty good. So, okay, well, let's track what you, first off, the first thing was they didn't eat as good as they thought. And second, they started to recognize there were patterns within their eating, both in how their energy was, or their fluctuated, when they had cravings and all this stuff. And from that feedback, we could start tweaking their diet through, adjusting maybe their proteins or their fat content or their fiber content, or reducing simple carbohydrates into more complex carbohydrates. And all of a sudden they would just start to feel better. And then they would start to see these cues. And once they got to a certain level of awareness, I always would say to people, my goal is not for you to maintain dependence on me. I'm here to teach you how to recognize your own feedback mechanisms so that you can self-adjust.
Yeah.
And that was always my goal. And yeah, we didn't have all that. Now years later, many of the things that we discovered just from our journal and paper turned out to be accurate. The thing is, I think for a lot of people, they don't have the time and energy to, or the knowledge to maybe look at the selection of what might be the move if they, have an undesirous effect to something. And that's where expertise comes in. And people say, well, I can't afford it. You can't afford not to. Everything shuts down when you lose your health.
Yeah.
Everything. Your ability to work, your ability to relate to people, your ability to socialize, your ability to feel good, all that stuff gets compromised when you lose your health. So, and you will lose your health. At some point, it's going to go. We're all going to die. The question is how long can you maintain a robust level of health so you can maximize your experience here? So whatever you invest in your health is going to pay you dividends in the other areas of your life. And if you're listening to this podcast, you already understand that. It's because otherwise you'd be watching the news or something.
So it's about awareness, Wade. I think you're saying people are going to become aware. If they're not going to journal, they're not going to sort of document then, and they've got the finances, then they can go to do the testing. But you've got to become aware. If you become aware, that's the good place to start. Obviously, things like body composition, people can help you and tell you how important that is, whether you're plant-based or carnivore. These things are becoming, you need to maintain your strength. It's an awareness start. So let's talk about how, maybe a little story. I'm a comrades runner. It's a 56-mile race. I did 11 in a row. I've done over 40,000 kilometers on the road. And until before the pandemic, where it was shut down and it didn't happen in 2020 and 2021, I decided to reverse my cardio versus strengthening. I did 5 strengthening workouts a week and 2 cardios, and I couldn't fast like I normally could. Normally running cardio, I could only, fast 1 meal. Previously on cardio, I could fast 2. I'd only do 1 meal a day. But once I started doing strengthening work, I found in the middle of the day, I was really struggling. I included another meal, Wade, and I started putting on size. I put on 7 kgs of lean muscle mass. Tell us a bit about becoming aware, and possibly if I had the right enzymes or the right probiotics, I might not needed that other meal. Is there a possibility that your nutritional needs change, your microbiome changes according to your exercise or your lifestyle? You may not need to pull the lever of nutrition, but you might be lacking supplements or enzymes. The first time I heard about enzymes was 13 years ago when I studied my first regenerative medicine course in America called prolotherapy. I've done over 27,000 sessions now, so I'm a huge enzyme fan. I know that's been one of your calls to fame, but tell us a little bit about pulling the supplement sort of lever rather than the nutritional lever as our bodies changed, and a little bit more about enzymes. I think they've been a real sort of your call out there, your fame worldwide.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, a couple of things that occurred in my journey. So first, just to comment on your situation, when the energetic requirements to build a pound of lean body mass, there's some estimates it's around 5,000 calories. So building muscle is metabolically energy taking, and that's why lean body mass is one of the indicators in order of maintaining healthy body weight as well as longevity. So your ability to maintain that keeps your metabolism up, less likely to go into obesity and things like that. And we live sedentary lifestyles, so we have much less muscle mass, and you can see this with grip strength drop over the years. It's very fascinating if you track the average grip strength. So that's number one. Number two is, since particularly after World War II, our development, we had the baby boom, and there was a movement, an agricultural society and a rural society into cities. And we started shifting how we manufactured, produced, and distributed food. So we went to monoculture farming, stopped crop rotation. The plants got weaker, so we started augmenting for growth rates with fertilizer, which further depleted the nutrients. As the plants got weaker, they gave up protein in order to convert to enzymes. And then as they got weaker, they had to use things like herbicides and pesticides and fungicides to fight off, because these were the aspects that maintain plant health, just like us. And ironically, those chemical agents would erode our natural digestive process. Our natural digestive process is we taste, touch, smell the food. That preps the nervous system. We start to chew and masticate it. The food goes down the esophagus into the upper cardiac portion of the stomach. Hydrochloric acid comes in 30 to 60 minutes later. That disinfects from viruses, bacteria, bugs, infections, whatever that happens to be, they get in there, and then the body will buffer that acid before it goes out into the intestines. And then you have, I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have 10% good, 10% bad, and 80% opportunists of this, what's called our microbiome, all these different arrays of different probiotics. And these probiotics manufacture various nutrients, chemicals, antioxidants. So basically, your food enters into a single canal into the body. It's not in your cells where you need it. It's in that canal. And that digestive process will determine how much of any given food that you eat gets converted into energy units or building blocks. End of story. Now, if you have a disruption in that process, your ability to extract the elements that you need in order to live healthily becomes compromised. Now, this is widespread, and I'll give you some statistics to back this up in the United States. On any given day, the average American, there's 100 million Americans that suffer from some sort of digestive condition. 25% of those are on some form of prescription or over-the-counter medication. Wow. And 13% of the emergency hospital visits are related to gastrointestinal issues. Whoa. Well, that's because most everything that you see in a grocery store as labeled as food didn't exist as food 100 years ago. And that disrupts particularly how we break things down. And we don't have enzymes present in the food. When you eat food in nature, all animals eat a food in an enzymatically rich state. Yeah. Live food. So a bear, eats berries or salmon, it eats it live and gets the enzymes and probiotics. Or a cow or a horse eats grass or sprouts and gets the enzymes, probiotics with it. A tiger eats a zebra, it gets the enzymes and probiotics, which aid in the digestion of that animal. But with food production as is, we cook things, we irradiate, we pasteurize, in order to preserve them, add preservatives, dyes, all these sort of things, and stabilize them, vacuum seal them, and then they have a long durability. And there's advantages to that. I'm not here to discredit it, but there's also liabilities to it. And the liabilities is it starts to disrupt their natural digestion. Our body has to produce more enzymes. So if you look at a weight of animals, so if you take any animal species and you compare their pancreas to the human pancreas, the human's pancreas will be 3.5 times the size of any animal per weight. Now, if you feed that animal species a highly refined processed food diet, guess what happens to the pancreas, which starts to increase. Okay, so we see the same thing with gallbladder. We see with liver dysfunction, fatty liver, stuff like that. These are the liver manufactures the enzymes. Things like pancreas and gallbladder are storage mechanisms for these enzymes. So they work symbiotically together. And I discovered this the unfortunate way when I was competing at the Mr. Universe contest. I had the best coach in the world. I had Spartan-like discipline. I'm following this very rigid diet for an extended period of time. And after the Mr. Universe contest, I gained 42 pounds of fat and water in 11 weeks. I went from Mr. Universe to Mr. Marshmallow. And I met a doctor who started to explain this very process to me. I started adding enzymes and probiotics, hydrochloric acid, to my diet. And within 6 months, I got my physique back. I got my health back. But more importantly, I had a new level of vitality, energy, and robust level of health and vitality because I was extracting more nutrients out of the food I was eating. Yes, I made some dietary adjustments from a performance-based diet to a health-based diet. And then it took me about 4 years to figure out how to do it on a performance side. I went back to the World Championships 3.5 years later, and had a better success than before, didn't have the weight gain, didn't have any of that stuff. So I was like, okay, now I can start really writing and doing this. And I was able to replicate this with thousands of people. And that was the foundation of BiOptimizers. So we started to focus on digestion. Now, turns out recently I found out from DNA testing that I don't possess the gene to detox my gut. So I was predisposed to have gut issues. And out of that need, I ended up founding a company on digestive health. Amazing. And now we have a partnership with Birch International University in Croatia, where we're doing all sorts of experiments to prove the efficacy of our products, as well as to develop new products to ensure and to improve people's digestion so they can get more of their diets. So that's a long drawn out answer, but I think to be able to get to the conclusion I came to, you have to understand the grand picture of the last 100 years and why we've got to this state, and why maybe some of the great advocates that didn't think of enzymes and probiotics because it wasn't relevant then, but it is relevant in today's world, just like the internet is a relevant conversation, which wasn't 25, 30 years ago.
But maybe tell us a bit about your research on enzymes, because I mean, I've been a functional medicine doc for many years. We've used probiotics. We try and maintain microbial diversity. I've had William Davis on the show. I've had Dr. Ali Rezai from UCLA talk about SIBO and IBD and IBS. We've had a lot of podcasts in terms of fermented foods and how important they are. But there's something specific about your story and enzymes. Yes, we use enzymes with patients and clients here, not nearly as robust as your product. And, I'm going to do as much as I can to get BiOptimizers into South Africa, because, and I'm going to talk about your empirical, experience, your history, but also your science. You committed to science. So those two railway tracks are very, very powerful. But why enzymes, and should everybody be taking enzymes, and should they be changing their enzymes? And, it's a minefield out there. If someone should be taking it always, if they should give it a break to their gut. I mean, I took enzymes for a while. I don't take them now. If I start some regenerative prolotherapy or PRP or stem cells or ozone, I'll take enzymes for maybe 3-6 months. But I'm training hard 7 days a week generally. Does everybody need enzymes, Wade?
I believe so, because it's a natural part of the dietary consumption levels of every species on the planet except humans, because we're the only species that cooks our food. So that's it just wasn't accounted for in some of our dietary channels. Now let's look at another piece, and I'll go and cite enzyme nutrition and enzymes, food enzymes for health and longevity, written back in around the 40s by Dr. Edward Howe. And the first research was Pottinger's cats, about which is a precursor, where they fed cats an enzymatically deficient diet, and by the third generation they ran into all the problems. So Dr. Howe expanded those experiments from rats to cats to dogs, and what he found was when you fed every species that he fed an enzymatically deficient diet, a few things happened. Number one, that the species started to change their social behavior, that they didn't start acting like the normal aspects. Number two, they started to develop an array of genetic-based diseases. And number three, by third generation, they lost the ability to procreate. And so in the 1950s, I believe it was, he predicted the same thing would happen to human with the change in the dietary practices that were happening. So it turns out we're kind of in that space, a rapid rise in genetic-based diseases. Obviously, you turn on social media, there's definitely strange antisocial behavior relative to normal human conduct. And fertility is a big issue in the modern world. And there's a bunch of causes to that. The other thing that he noticed is that when he fed animals and supplemented their diet with enzymes, they lived longer than the other enzymes. And I was like, okay, well, is that the case? And then I thought, well, wait a second. Every culture in the world has developed the practice of fasting as a way to heal. We also see in nature, I grew up in a rural area, that if an animal is sick, they stop eating. Why is that? Well, you free up, according to how you free up your metabolic enzymes when you're fasting and not eating. Now, if you look at all the longevity studies, the number one correlation with longevity is you eat less. So is it the eating less, or is it the metabolic costs of digesting the food that is draining? You're converting your metabolic enzymes into digestion. When you fast or you reduce your diet, then you're not putting as much strain on the system. Therefore, the system is able to extend longer, because enzymes control every single process in the body, from like thinking to blinking. There's over 25,000 enzymatic processes, which are categorized into families: proteases, which break down protein; amylases, which break down carbohydrates; and lipases, which break down fats. And then you could go into cellulases, which break down plant fibers. Now, there's variations within all those families as well, like mast enzymes with 17 different enzymes inside of it. But the key elements that we see is proteolytic activity. So undigested proteins and the inflammatory response in the body is one of the biggest causes of disease in the body, or dysfunction. And that's basically proteins aren't getting digested. They're getting eaten up by bad bacteria, producing endotoxins, things like that. Or proteins are breaking through the intestinal lining and getting into the system, and the body's seeing that as some sort of pathogen that needs to be attacked. So that takes energetic resources. Every time that you are under attack, well, it's like if your country was under attack, you're going to have to garner resources. It's going to cut down supply, and that's going to keep you from doing other things. And so I looked at, well, could we accelerate the benefits of fasting if we took super physiological dosages of enzymes? If that theory turns out, well, we were able to produce better results from fasting. In other words, a better preservation of lean body mass, a reduction of food cravings, as well as an improvement of speed of healing and loss of body fat during these fast processes, just by doing the exact same thing with the exact same person, but adding enzymes versus not adding enzymes. So from that process, we were able to ascertain through basically observational clinical data of people's responses to that. We also were able to find out later on that from hematomas, scar tissue from surgery, and recovery, if you're using proteolytic enzymes, we could see that improvement. And then there was all the research from Dr. Gonzalez in cancer research, where they were using super physiological dosages of proteolytic enzymes in order to attack tumors. And that was very exciting. And if people want to research that, I think it's really important to do so. And so I applied it to my own life and improved my recovery, my performance, my ability to train harder, longer, faster, and recover better. And so we started in 2004 advocating this with our first product, Masterclass, the first version of that, Matt and I, and it built almost like a cult-like following in the athletic world. And now almost every protein in the market at the high-end side has some form of digestive enzymes. And I like to think that Matt and I contributed to that message almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did, and like I said, I learned it from my mentor in Fort Myers way back in 2010 to supplement those that are going to trying to build white tissue, ligamentous or capsular tissue or disc tissue by giving them enzymes. And there were a lot of studies in those days showing how it benefited patients. But so the person listening out there, Wade, let's just simplify. Everybody should be taking enzymes. What enzymes should they take? Should they change their enzymes? I mean, how should they practically do this?
Yeah, so we've actually asked that question first. So when we first started out, our primary drive was performance and recovery. So we built kind of an all-inclusive enzyme we call Masszymes. It's enzymes for the masses. And it's about 50% of that is based on proteolytic enzymes, which are the most expensive enzymes. These are all cultured enzymes. I'll explain what that means in a minute. But, and then the array of enzymes that would suit a variance in dietary practices. Matt being a keto guy, me being a plant-based guy, we need something to address all of it. So that became our flagship. It's still our best-selling enzyme product in the company. We're coming out with version 4 very soon. So we keep improving and optimizing that. You know, we've had other agents to improve the enzymatic activity and other elements that we'll be filing some patents on very soon. So it's very exciting. Okay. If they're on a ketogenic diet, they would probably do something better on CAPEX, which is, focusing a distribution of the enzyme formula between protease and lipase is the big drivers in that formula. We don't need carbohydrates because they're not eating carbohydrates. You don't need the amylases. You don't need the cellulases. Then we have vegzymes, which is really high. We just released that recently, which is really high on the enzymes that break down carbohydrates and fibrous tissues. Because a lot of people, even if they're not on a vegetarian diet, their body doesn't break down plant matter very well. They don't feel good, even though they get the benefits from the phytonutrients. They don't have the enzymatic capability to break that down. So we can add vegzymes for that. And then we have Gluten Guardian, which is for people who have problem breaking down gluten. It has an enzyme called dipeptidyl peptidase 4, which breaks down gluten. It also has an interesting effect on casein as well. And I don't know the mechanism. We haven't been able to discover the mechanism. We're researching that at our labs, and we have a university.
Yeah, because I heard about that from Ben Greenfield. I was on his podcast. He was on my podcast. He's a big fan of Gluten Guardian or Guardian Gluten. He speaks highly of it and travels with it as well. So is obviously there's proprietary knowledge there and IP that South Africans and Africans need to get their hands on. So we're trying to deal with health authorities here to get some of these things in. So basically, everybody needs enzymes. You need to dose at what dosage. If they can't get in BiOptimizers, what should they do? What dosages should they look for? Obviously, it's bespoke to their diet. You've made that quite clear, and that makes sense. At the end of the day, you need the enzymes to break down the food you're mainly eating, which is fascinating. But what should they do?
Well, I'll give them a little simple test that they can test whatever enzyme blend that they have. Take a bowl of oatmeal, right? Because when you look at enzymes, let me preliminate this. There's these weird international units for how much a product that will actually break down. There's like HUTs, and I see, like, it's a very complex thing. It's very confusing in the enzyme world. So I'm going to give people a practical, and there's plant-based enzymes, there's animal-based enzymes, okay? And then there's cultured enzymes. And cultured enzymes are usually somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times more potent than, say, an animal or a plant-based enzyme. So they're grown on special mediums. Animal enzymes usually have a very narrow pH range, and plant enzymes usually have a broader pH range of where they're active. And so we'll leave that at that because that's a simple format. But take a bowl of oatmeal, for example, break open a couple of caps of your product, whatever one you trust, and stir it into the oatmeal. Now, if that enzyme is active and working, it should turn that bowl of oatmeal to a pretty much liquid within a couple minutes. If it doesn't do that, it's not an active enzyme. You got sold, send it back, get your money back, whatever. And so with things like meat, it takes a little bit longer, the breakdown cycle. So on our website, we actually put videos of that online where
Wow.
I just throw a couple caps in a bowl of oatmeal and it turns into liquid. We have a controlled experiment where we put steak and we put the masszymes inside the steak with just a little bit of vinegar, and you watch it break it down. Then we add, what happens if you add like P3OM, a proteolytic probiotic, it accelerates the process. And then now we're releasing in some other ones that were done under extreme scientific rigor at the Birch International University, where they're going to be demonstrating, what meets kind of international publication standards for testing, so that you can see the results of what we're able to produce. And so, but a simple test is just do that at home.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, let's move on to probiotics and how important that is to change your probiotic. I think we stock about 6-7 different types of probiotics, and the testing is very expensive, doing a Viome test or doing a GI map test. And what should people do? They should give their probiotic sort of regimen a rest at times. Just give us a little bit of information that people can take home with regards to probiotic use.
Yes. Number one, experiment. The microbiome is literally changing on a day-to-day basis, on a food-to-food basis. What I would say is your probiotic should have a sufficient amount of prebiotics in the caps in order for it to survive. I prefer freeze-dried capsules as opposed to ones that are stored in cool places. And the reason is just with transport, manufacturing, and how things are shelved in stores, it's very hard to maintain temperature, and small variances in temperature can have profound effects on probiotics. So I would stay away from the cool, dry ones. The principle makes sense. I just think the practicality is very difficult. Okay. So I think freeze-dried with prebiotics is good. You want to avoid anything with the weird additives, like the stearates and the dioxides and all those other chemical agents that you don't want inside of your probiotics that can disrupt it. And then start trying different families of probiotics. Most probiotics will be based on, they'll be breaking down sugars. There are some that'll work a little bit on fats, and some and only a few that work on proteases. I like looking for kind of systematized or customized probiotics. So usually the best companies will develop probiotics with a specific function. So they'll say this probiotic is designed to this because they've identified that maybe there's one, two, three, four families
Okay.
that produce a certain result. So for example, I'll give you two examples from our own company. We have, we took L. plantarum, which is a robust, aggressive strain. We put it through a toxic soup, ran a sine wave to go in, and about somewhere between 2 and 3% survive. We experimented with the different types of prebiotics that they grow on. We found the one that they accelerate best. And then we grew that medium. And so we had, like, we called it Navy SEALs of probiotics. They went through the buds camp, everybody dropped out. The ones that survived, we were able to replicate them and grow them on better chow, if you will. And they were able to advocate. There's a US patent on, I can't say it online because they'll cancel me because it's so awesome, but it's on our website and you can look at the US patent and what its capabilities are, far and away of any probiotic. Now we drove out the cognibiotic. So for example, serotonin, the neurotransmitter serotonin, which many people today are deficient in, is 95% of it's produced in your gut, and it's produced by a few strains of bacteria. So we developed a probiotic that was specific with the prebiotics that we were able to test that they live on to work on serotonin production. Now, if you combine that with, say, magnesium, which also is a precursor to neurotransmitter formation, many people who suffer from low mood or these type of conditions start to notice an improvement after just a few weeks of on that, because now their body's producing more serotonin. So I like to look at families of probiotics. There's a few companies out there that do that, and most of them are using research, and then they're taking the research to put the product in. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of products is they put what I call a mishmash of maybes in a bottle. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, or they're white labeling it, putting some slick marketing, promising the mood, and it doesn't deliver. At the end of the day, if you try something for, say, a month, you should be able to, and you're keeping your journal, you should be able to make notes. Maybe your bathroom breaks are better. Maybe you've noticed an improved sense of mood. Maybe you're not getting illnesses or sicknesses. If it's an immune booster, these type of things might be reduction of bloating or gas. These type of things you should be feeling those from your probiotics. If you're not feeling anything from it, chances are it's not working.
Okay, good one. Good summary there. I think there's a lot to take from that. Once again, you've got this sort of unique bespoke approach. Just, you got to become aware. Maybe you look at your aura ring, maybe you look at some type of testing, maybe you just go on the subjective feeling and what's happening with your stomach. But I think these are very important. I think it just takes work and time, and a lot of people just want to take that quick fix, that quick pill, and make sure it's all going to be okay. But we just so individualized, and I think that's a very big, strong message from Wade with regards to how and what his company stands for. So, Wade, tell us a little bit about a message of hope and the collective consciousness that's happening out there in South Africa. 80% of people over the age of 50 have high blood pressure. That means, I think about 60% have one chronic disease in South Africa. It seems like we're losing the battle against chronic disease. And I mean, you've been around the block, you've trained, you've looked at nutrition, you've dealt with thousands and thousands of clients, you've built an incredible company. And, like I said, again, I'm really going to try and get you guys here because I do think there's a lot of wisdom, but there's a lot of science. And the fact that you're looking at research and you're putting it through the testing, there's not many supplement companies that do that have research. Am I right?
Almost none.
Yeah. So, I mean, I salute you guys. I take my hat off to you. And that's what I've really picked up through listening to you and over the years. But tell us about a message of hope. What's going to happen with the future of health? Because it seems like people are taking less accountability of their health. They're just really just falling into chronic disease earlier and earlier in their lives, and kids are becoming obese. And it seems like the minority in terms of people who are healthy is getting less and less.
Yeah, so I think we're under what I call an evolutionary pressure. So a lot of people misidentified what Darwin said, and he said that it wasn't the survival of the fittest, it was the survival of the most adaptable. And since 1900, it's been the most rapid period of evolutionary change in human history and recorded human history. So we've literally gone from horse and wagons, which my grandfather was on, to rocket ships and satellites and telecommunications, and a complete changing of the food cycle, an extraordinary development in modern medicine, which treats acute conditions. But way back in the Bush administration, I read a Professor Oshansky in the New England Journal of Medicine who said, look, we've got a major problem. Life expectancy in the United States went from the 1960s, an expected age of 67, all the way up to just under 80 years old. However, so this is the early 2000s, we've got an issue. And the issue is the disability adjusted life expectancy has now reduced to 60. And so we're spending 20 years dependent in a compromised lifestyle to some sort of chronic disease. You know, the big ones, if you look at what kills people, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and medical error, usually some contraindication of the treatments that they've gotten for the first three. Now, the first three, according to the Surgeon General of the United States, says that 90% of the illnesses people die from are actually preventable. Okay, well, that's good news, but no one's advocating that. And here's the thing. Your government's job, they're not interested in you living long. They're interested in you living long enough to continue to pay them taxes until you become a liability. And at that point, there's no interest in keeping you going. The idea is to extract as much money out of that system, out of you, and recycle it. That's just the nature of that business. It's an entity of its own. So you as a human, I like to think of myself as a single cell in the organ of humanity throughout all of time. So there's all the ancestors before me that led to this point of the human body. And then there's all the future people going. Each one of us is working like a little cell in that human body. And there are practices. So everybody's valuable within the human condition. You know, it's like liver cells and brain cells and heart cells. We all need those things. So we don't have to define ourselves by what we do or how much money we make or what titles we've been given. That's irrelevant. Our job is to be as healthy as possible and to replicate the healthiest version that we are able to cultivate with whatever other single organism that we bond with, right? Or you might decide that that's not right for you. Okay, that's fine. So in that model, I need to advocate my health. Now, there are principles and feedback loops that tell me if I'm doing a good job or not, if I'm overweight, if I'm getting a disease, if I'm tired and don't have energy and I'm not able to produce. That's feedback loops telling me that what I'm currently doing isn't working and I need to course correct and adjust. It's like your driving car. If you drive down the road with a blindfold on, it's not going to be very long before you crash into something. Is that the car's fault? No. Is it your fault? So you have to remove the blindfolds. And you can't sit there and you couldn't drive with a blindfold and have the radio come in and a government official say, turn right here, turn left here. How long do you think you would last? It's not going to course correct fast enough. Same thing as your medical doctor. Your medical doctor is bound by a very specific set of rules that doesn't allow him or her to be an advocate for your health. They're there to treat the symptoms of your disease through what they're instructed with, mostly pharmaceutical intervention or surgery. And it's not that's bad, but you have to understand who's doing what and where you're putting your accountability and responsibility to. And at the end of the day, health is solely our responsibility. Now, if you don't know how to get healthy, you have to use your intelligence and your resources to recognize, well, I can't have anything without my health. Therefore, I need to divert a certain amount of my resources towards my health. And if I do so by getting expertise, intelligence, so it'd be like, I'm a liver cell. I send a message up to the brain and the brain tells me, hey, dude, you need some more plants, or you need some more essential fatty acids, or you need some more protein. Okay. So I then follow that and give up my own ideas, because if you're not in the condition that you want, you're not in the health that you want, you have to recognize you got you there, not your parents, not your spouse, not your kids, not your job, all of those things. It's you. You've made those the choices, or you've chose to not make a choice, which is a choice in itself.
Yeah.
And so I would say, take control of your life, be an advocate for health, and take responsibility for it, and get someone who has what you want to achieve. They're a demonstrable aspect for themselves, maybe they overcome the same challenges that you have and start learning from them and applying that. And, we give away a course on our site called the Awesome Health Course. It's basically 5 to 15 minute videos with the whole pillars: air, water, and exercise. Those 3 things are non-negotiable. Forget diet. If you're not doing those 3 things,
just maybe you can unpack on that, because I think that's very important, because those sound quite free. They're not too costly. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's 80% of the game. So I have what's called I try to figure out the grand universal theory of how we could navigate all these kind of variances in information. And so I came up with 7 pillars. I called it the Awesome Formula, and based on what makes the cell operate perfectly. And it's so cellular respiration, air, hydration, which is water, and movement, exercise. If you stop movement, you're
in trouble.
Your body, anybody that's been to the hospital will see all their muscles load, all their organs go down and everything. So when I tested people in my clinic, they were chronically dehydrated. People were drinking liquids, but they weren't hydrating. They weren't getting water into the cells where they need it. And breathing will regulate both your emotions, your psychology. It will determine your respiration rate, how much work you're doing with your heart and your lungs. And by improving your cardiovascular health, you will be able to be more efficient with how you burn energy. Your requirements for energy will be reduced, and chances are you will live longer because you're a fuel efficient system. So ideally, you want to get to the top 2.5 percentile in cardiovascular health, in lean body mass, in bone density. Okay. And if you do those 3 things, you're going to have all the rest of this licked. And if you set those as the standards, your diet will start to correlate based on those standards for yourself. Oh yeah. And the other thing is you want to maintain the upper 2.5 percentile of lean body fat percentage, right? So you can have a little calipers to do that. You can do a 12-minute run to see where you fall on the cardiovascular scale. Okay. You can, and from those 2 things, and you can, is your pee clear or is it yellow? Those 3 biofeedback markers will tell you right where you're doing inside of your health and longevity. Can you see your, can you see your abs? Well, if you can't, well, you could probably get a little leaner.
Brilliant. Simple, but very, very powerful and profound. And what I like about it is it's just available to a lot of people. I think we've got to make health very affordable, very practical and pragmatic for people to implement, because I know what the pandemic's done. It's impoverished many people. It's enslaved many people. And I'm not saying they should have taken accountability. I think they placed themselves in that situation mainly to be taken advantage of, but that's the reality of where they are. So I believe there is awakening, there's an enlightenment. People like you have been speaking about holistic health, and just something that's close to my heart, maybe you can speak about it, is there's an African word called Ubuntu. It is speaks about wholeness and community and togetherness, and it really means I am because we are. That health cannot, you can't have good health or holistic health as an individual. It happens within a community of people loving you and you loving them, of surrounding yourself with people that support you, that encourage you, that validate you, that give you significance. Maybe speak about your personal, communities, your multiple communities, how important they are for health, that people can sort of realize that they cannot do it alone, they shouldn't do it alone, and they weren't created to do it alone.
What makes humans relatively unique is their cultivation of sophisticated levels of speech and communication. And that's what separates us from all other species on the planet, is how we're weaker than most of the animals out there. We don't have fangs and claws and these things, but we're able to collectively work together as units to survive all of the big predatory animals. So how are we able to do that? It's because we were able to leverage individual skills and collective intelligence from a community. There's also feedback loops built into our emotional regulatory systems that tells us when we're part of a community, we feel connected, we feel good, we feel safe, we feel wholesome. It's also a regulatory aspect of our neurotransmitter system to see where we fit within a tribe. to show if we're providing relevance and value to that community. And one thing that I've noticed is the happiest people I've ever met are usually connected to some sort of service within the communities they find themselves in. In other words, they feel like a valued member of the tribe that they are part of. So if your tribe is advocating something that's wholesome, as opposed to attacking something that you have a problem with, you're probably on the right path, because you are leveraging your anabolic nervous system response, your positive neurotransmitter cascade, which has a benefit to both your social, psychological, and physiological health. So get around people that make you feel good. Get around people who are working towards something in a positive nature without condemning other people. And you'll quickly find that it's easy to make the adjustments in your life that will give robust levels of health and vitality. And I think the best things in life are when we are part of a community, and that could be your own family. That can be people who you go running with or working out with, or maybe studying some intellectual pursuit. Get inside that, share ideas, be open, be flexible, and contribute to the best of your ability wherever you are. And that is the pathway to a happy life.
Brilliant. And I want to become part of the BiOptimize community, because I realize there's multiple communities out there. So I want to declare favor and blessing over you, Wade Lightheart. You're a soul that wants to see people's lives transform, living out their purpose, living out their destiny and who they are. You've done this for many, many years. And I think there's a truth and there's a integrity that just flows out of you. So I do want to just salute you and say thank you. It's this place, this world is better for having people like you, your team. They were incredible at the Health Optimization Summit. We didn't get onto magnesium, but I tried the magnesium breakthrough, brilliant product, and it was wonderful, to test and try that. So hopefully after the show, we can just see how we're going to get this into Africa, because I really believe that your company you've built, and you've built time with your staff, there's going to be longevity there, Wade. And I've seen a lot of supplement companies over 23 years of practice. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. It's our honor and our privilege, and thank you for having me.